You are listening to Her Time to Retire, a podcast dedicated to helping women gain the knowledge, confidence, and support they need to achieve financial success and emotional fulfillment when planning for retirement. If you are ready to finally take charge of your financial life, then keep listening. Your hosts are Glenn Price and Jonathan Scott, founders of Keystone Financial Resources in Brentwood, Tennessee. Both men specialize in crafting individualized retirement plans for women and have a passion for helping women discover and achieve their retirement goals. Glenn is a husband and father of 4 who was taught early in life through his relationship with his grandmother how a woman can not only take charge of her own destiny, but also positively influence the lives of her family and friends that surround her. Jonathan, husband and father of 3, attributes his own success to the strong women in his life, including his wife Brooke and his mother Suzanne. Both men together want to help more women live out their dreams in retirement. As always, if you have retirement questions, their phone lines are open at 615-661-9554, or you can visit their website to browse information, view upcoming events, or subscribe to the Her Time to Retire weekly newsletter. Just visit www.KeystoneFinancialResources.com. Now relax and enjoy the conversation.
Well, good afternoon, ladies. I want to welcome you to Her Retirement Podcast. My name is Glenn Price. I'm here with my business partner, Jonathan Scott. We're co-founders of Keystone Financial Resources here in Brentwood, Tennessee. And I want to welcome all of you to our Her Retirement webinar, where we help women retire the way they want to retire with confidence. Now, today we're going to touch on a few different topics. One is the importance of aligning your money and your values. Then we're going to talk about, you've got 401k plans and IRA plans that have been hit because of what's been going on in the market. So what should you be doing, if anything, right now? And then we'll talk about knowing where you stand. But before we jump into that, let me take just a moment and let's talk about, Jonathan, why we're here. In other words, why we're starting a podcast called Her Retirement in the first place.
Yeah, I think it really has to do with just a realization by us both of a focus that's not being made on a regular basis, but needs to be. And we've really realized over the years that women are experiencing a lot of things pertaining to retirement that men are not. And so it's not something of being exclusive from men. It's more a point of realizing that women have some very unique things surrounding retirement that they're experiencing that men aren't.
Yep.
For instance, just a quick thought about that is just a statistic that we keep mentioning. It's a very real statistic that 80% of men die married, but 80% of women die single. So they are definitely experiencing retirement differently.
They are, and another way to say that is, ladies, that 80% of those of you that are married, your husbands will not know if their financial plan succeeds or fails.
That's so funny.
And so it's the ball's going to be left in your court to know what to do and how to do that. I mean, we look back and, I've been doing this now for over 26 years, and you've been doing this for over 25 or 26 years, but we've been very fortunate. Over a decade ago now, Jonathan, we've joined forces. We both have a passion for what we do. And, what's also interesting that I think these ladies need to hear is why two men, are so motivated to help empower women on how to take control of their finances and have confidence. And I think it ties to our personal stories. For me, it was my grandmother, and for you, it was your mom. Why don't you tell us a little bit about that story of yours?
It's a part of who we are. It's very clear. It's not something that we make as a personal decision. That's an appeal that we would purposely make to somebody. It is a part of who we are intrinsically. So, in my personal life, just very quickly, my mom emerged as a hero to me very early on. My mom and dad went through a very nasty divorce. It wasn't any type of normal divorce situation, and it was more of an abandonment. And through that process, I really watched my mom, get up, tighten her bootstrings, and go into battle, basically. I watched all her security washed away from her in a very quick fashion. I watched her really anguish over it, but I saw her emerge a fighter, and I saw her take the reins for our family, really lead us to where we are. I gained just such a great respect through that, and I also remember feeling this feeling of wanting to protect, of wanting to take care, of wanting to make sure that nothing bad could touch her or touch us. Now, over time, that's a balancing act of how much of that is
Right.
positive, how
That's
much of
right.
that is negative. But it still is a part of who we are. And I think when somebody sits down with me, they feel that. They feel that if I'm going to take you on as a client, and I'm looking at you as a potential client, I know that, Glenn and I have a 99% retention rate, meaning that less than 1% of our clients ever leave and go anywhere else. So it's a
Yes.
long-term relationship. We're looking at it that way from our perspective.
Absolutely.
But when I'm looking at them, I'm looking, hey, this is somebody, when they come in, I'm going to take care of them. I'm going to be protecting them, and they're going to feel that. They're going to feel that added layer of protection when they're with us. And I think that naturally just comes out because it is a true part of who we are.
Of who we are. And, it's, we both, that's what's unique about our story is that we both have similar, passions. For me, my parents divorced when I was, just 14 months old. My mom was just 15 when she got pregnant, so she was just a kid. So I ended up living with my dad, and he remarried, and Christy's parents became Nana and Pa to me, and they were farmers. And so, I never lived out in the country, but I got to move out in the country and live on the farm next door to Nana and Pa, and I practically was there almost every day and was helping them on the farm. And, I was so fortunate because they began to pour into my life, like, mentors. I mean, I can remember Pa, saying, Glenn, your word is your bond. When you tell somebody you're going to do something, you do it. When you make somebody a promise, you keep it. And he was also a very hard worker. He'd say, hey, this life's, nothing's for free. You got to earn it. And he led by example. And then Nana, I mean, what a woman of integrity. And, she would say, Glenn, integrity is one of those things that you do not when just people are watching, but when they're not. And, I used to love waking up there in the mornings to the smell of the aroma of breakfast that she was fixing. And I also loved it when it was rainy days because I got to sit in the kitchen and talk to Nana. But, when we were there in the kitchen, there was no TV or radio. It was just us. And I learned a lot there. We would plan out our day. We would plan out at lunch how we were going to overcome challenges on the farm. And then at dinner, we would talk about, what fields had to be planted and who was going to feed the animals. And I mean, this young boy that was just immersed in this family, it was just amazing. But then one day everything changed. And, Pa was healthy. He was in his 60s, but he had a leaky heart valve. And so he went in for a surgery, and I'll never forget, the surgeon was like, hey, he's going to be fine. He was very positive and optimistic. And so, of course, we felt positive and optimistic. But I'll never forget when the doctor came out. Nana was the first one to meet him, and the fear that I saw in her eyes when the doctor began to talk about, due to unexpected complications, he didn't make it, he was gone. So here was this woman who was like my hero, Nana, and she was always so strong and always so confident. And now, I saw her afraid, and I saw her begin to, question things, and I began to be very confused because she, had to go back to work very quickly. And I can remember her telling me, Glenn, planning for retirement is just one of those things that, we thought we would get around to doing, but honestly, we didn't know what to do, who to talk to, how to do it. And so we just kept doing the only thing we knew how to do, and that was to farm. And so, as a result of what happened, at that time, I watched this lady again begin to change, and it's like, oh my gosh, hey, we have things that shape us, like that shaped your life.
Right.
Shapes I even know more deeper stories and how it shaped you, and that shaped me. And you ladies that are listening, you have stories that have shaped you. And it directed me toward the choice that I made over 25 years ago to become an advisor so that I could make sure that, when I'm sitting across the table, I mean, it's like I'm sitting with my Nana. I got a picture on behind the client, a picture of the barn at Nana and Pa's where I can see it.
Right.
And it's a reminder to me of why I do what I do. And I want to make sure that families are secure and safe, and that whatever they weren't, Nana wasn't expecting, none of us were. But I want to make sure that families are prepared when that happens. So I love that, we both have that same passion. And
It's one of the greatest rewards, honestly.
it is. And we're also so blessed to have such an amazing team of people, Jonathan, around us, that our staff and team that are committed to us, but are committed to our clients.
Right.
I mean, they love them. It's awesome.
Yeah. I'll laugh because, my mom actually still works up front here. And it's so neat because people understand, that relationship. They'll call in, and they'll know that care is going to be there.
Absolutely.
They actually look to her for that. So it's a neat atmosphere. But in thinking about how rewarding that is over time and that protective measure, I think about, it's not that we're not protective over all the clients, because we are. That's really who we are. But it's extra rewarding to get to know that you fill that void for someone that doesn't have that layer of protection. At least it is to me. That's how it feels. And so it's just an exciting thing. So that's a little bit, just touching on a little bit of who we are, why we would go ahead and focus and really say, hey, you know what, over these years, just naturally, lots of years of preparing plans, but we have identified some things that are uniquely going on in and around retirement for women, and we really want to be that voice out there that is focusing and saying, hey, you need to realize this, you need to look at this, you need to know this. These are the differences, and you need to be aware of them.
Absolutely. And, now you may be thinking, well, gosh, do y'all work with men? And absolutely, we don't exclude the fellas, but here's the reality of it. When we build a financial plan for a family, that's a couple that's married, we build it with the woman in mind. In other words, there's a her side and a his side. And it goes back to that statistic that you said, 80% of the men die married and 80% of the women die single. And so there's a whole nother level of planning around helping these women that the men will never have to, they'll never understand or know.
I mean, right down to some simple questions, just one of the things that I think about when I'm sitting with a couple. Oftentimes I'll be with a guy and he'll be talking about how he's arranged the investments, and he looks in the investment accounts for he and his wife, and he does that on a routine basis. And one of the questions that I'll always pose back across the table to the couple is, hey, Jim, I know that you really enjoy doing this right now, but does Sheila enjoy doing it as much as you do? And Sheila typically will say, well, you know what? Jim does that. I really don't even know that much about it. And he takes the lead there. And I said, well, I want you guys to think about what will happen, Jim, if you pass. If Sheila doesn't enjoy doing that, is there anybody in your life that does, and she will be able to rely on to take care of that for you? Mm-hmm. And so it's a real conversation that they've never thought about before. But by taking that one little snippet and putting Sheila, who I'd say Sheila is going to be around after Jim passes. Unfortunately, us guys just pass first. But,
Right.
She needs to think about what this looks like once Jim is gone.
Well, some of the facts, the stark facts are, why, ladies, if COVID-19 has done anything, I hope it's woken you up to the fact that you need to know, you got to know where everything is. I mean, and for those of you that are married, and you've allowed your husbands to kind of do that and take that role, if he gets sick and dies 7 days later, what are you going to need to know about finances? The answer is absolutely everything. And so, you can't afford to kind of stick your head in the sand. I think there's some women out there that just really don't care, right? But it doesn't negate the fact that they're probably going to be handling their money on a solo basis going forward. And so, so anyway, that was another thought that I had there.
Yeah, and I think they care for certain. But the reality is, just like you were alluding in the front when I said it was funny, is a lot of guys will come in and they want to make sure that the plan works, but they're only looking at it one direction. And the reality is, she'll be the one to find out if it really worked or not.
Exactly. So. Well, I'm so excited ladies, about the series of the podcast and the webinars. We actually have a webinar that we're doing. You can see it on our newsletter. So be sure and tune in to our webinar on if you go to KeystoneFinancialResources.com, www.KeystoneFinancialResources.com. We're going to be getting more into how do we help families, help ladies build a solid financial plan that they're comfortable with. But Jonathan, let's talk for a moment about, the right now with the way the market has been, right? We're seeing folks that their 401ks have taken a hit. And so, what are some things that they need to be thinking about, doing right now, if anything?
Some of the 401ks have become a 397, haven't they?
Yeah, or a 201k.
Or a 201k, right? Well, one of the main things that they can be doing right now is, if you think about it, when this all happened, it was a very broad-based sell-off, very emotional. There was nothing economically that was going on bad during that time. Yeah, there was some oil price changes, some oil trade tariffs, things like that going on. But the reality was, during that moment, we had a virus come in, and nobody really knew how to handle it or what the ramifications would be. And so it caused fear all the way across the board. And people began to sell off and sell just completely out of fear. Okay, and so everything went down broad-based, not one sector at a time, not one commodity at a time, pretty much everything across the board. And people pulled their 401ks out at that point. But I get a question all the time right now of people saying, okay, well, is it a bad idea to sell during this time, or should I just hold on in my 401k and let it come back organically in the same holdings that it was in when it went down? And the answer is no, probably not, because right now things are rebounding, not at an identical rate across the board. So you may have sat in something that went down at a rapid rate, just like everything else in the market. But as things are coming back and rebounding, they're coming back at different rates. And oftentimes it takes you going in and changing those holdings in order to capitalize on the full rebound that's going on. So now's a great time to look into reallocating, rebalancing those portfolios. It's really a time when, if you don't have anybody helping you do that, you need someone to look into where you're at and can you rebound quickly, because that's the name of the game.
Absolutely. And one of the areas through the COVID, the sectors that was helpful was the bond allocations. But going forward, as the market goes back up, it could be the piece of a portfolio that actually hurts the portfolio, because typically when the market's going up, bond values go down.
Sure.
So there's an example. We've watched small cap. We've seen those get pummeled. They're still getting hit. Because there's going to be, the reality is that some of these smaller companies are not going to be able to recover.
Right.
Their liquidity is completely gone. And so that's why we're seeing that sector, as a slow rise to come back. There'll be some that'll make it and regroup, and because I believe with everything in me, ladies, that this too shall pass. Do I think it's going to be quick? I don't think it's going to be quick, Jonathan. I think we've seen the market rebound from the panic, but I don't think we've seen it completely rebound from the economy recovering. We're seeing that, and there's positive things going on. But that rebalancing is a big deal.
It is. And you hit on the bonds for just a second, but if people think about it just very quickly, logically, when interest rates go up, bond rates go down. And over this period of time, they did what? They lowered the interest rates to the floor, to the bottom. So the interest rates only have one way to go from this point forward, and that's up, which means bond rates are going to go down. So again, the very thing that saved you during the COVID-19 crisis might have been being in bonds, but going forward from here, you're in a situation where you stand to lose if you're in a bond much more than 1 or 2 years out from today.
Yeah, absolutely. Another thing that we're talking to folks about is this idea of really knowing where you stand. I love this quote, and it says, if you don't know where you're going, you might not like where you end up. And so, right now we see that, a lot of times when folks come in, they've got we ask them, you and I talk about this all the time, hey, the question, hey, did you bring your financial plan? Well, absolutely. And they slide their statements across the table. And so they think that's their financial plan, and that's a piece of their plan, but it's just one piece. Let's talk for a moment about the importance of having a plan and why that's a big part of our practice in helping families make sure that they've got a good solid plan that they can have confidence in.
Well, you hit on it just a minute ago, Glenn. I mean, most people have investments out there. Most people have investments, but few people have a plan. And so your investments is not your plan. In order to have a plan, you've got to have a plan that tackles the what ifs that are out there that could come into your life. There's always these what ifs. Will it be enough? Well, that's part of the plan. You need to know if it'll be enough. What if this happens in the market? Will it still be enough? Again, that's part of a good plan. A good plan needs to be stress tested. It needs to factor in for the what ifs in life. It relates back to a story a long time ago. When we create a plan, Glenn and I look at creating a very comprehensive and cohesive plan. We not only look at income planning and investment planning, but we also look at tax strategies, at what you've done to plan for long-term care, at what you've done to plan for your estate. Who are you working with on your taxes?
Do they have a team?
Do you have a team? And is that team communicating together? And for most people, it's the first time in their life where they've ever had the concept that, oh, you mean my investment guy would talk to my accountant, and my accountant and my investment guy might speak to the attorney as well, and everybody's on the same page and knows cohesively and comprehensively what's going on in my plan. And if the what ifs happen, they've already stress tested the plan, and they already have a plan B if that takes place, and what do we do? And it's the first time in their life that they've experienced that. That's a true plan. And it related back to a story I was thinking of a military client that we have. He had gone over to Iraq, if I remember it correctly, and he said he was in a battlefield, and he was going in with his troop, and most everybody around him was cleared out and shot, just a ton of people. And he reached down, he grabbed a guy. He said they were able to pull his body armor off, put stuff into the wound, get him into one of the Humvees, get him out of there, get him to a medic, and all those things, and the fellow was able to live. And they looked at him and said, how did you know how to do that? And he says, man, we had practiced over and over and over for the what ifs. We knew what to do when that happened. And, it was impressed on Glenn and I to come back and tell our team, you know what? For every single one of these clients out there, we want to be the guys that know what to do when that happens.
Absolutely.
And so when these things come up, we know exactly how to take care of them. They're pre-planned out. We've looked at that before. We've looked at that scenario. That's a plan, and that's what few people have.
Yeah, absolutely. And, the name of our plan is the financial roadmap. And so, again, this idea of knowing where you're going, you've got to have a roadmap. And ladies, if your husband has handled the finances to this point, and you've never even met with the advisor, then I'd encourage you. You might want to get another advisor because you want to get involved. Because again, what we find is that most women end up managing money solo at some point in their life, and so it's important that you get in the game. But I'll tell you this too. At the end of the day, when you look at some of the numbers and we see that less than 45% of Americans have just enough money to pay their expenses at retirement, then that tells us that, while the guys have predominantly been managing a lot of the money, they've not necessarily done the best job. But what they also tells us is that, they need your help, and you need to get involved and know what's going on from that standpoint.
Yeah, and another thing I'd add there, just back to the guys, any guys listening, is Glenn and I never encounter a man that tells me that he doesn't want to take really good care of his wife.
Absolutely.
It's always one of their top goals. When I pass, I want to make sure that she's taken care of well. The fact of the matter is, they just don't know how to do it, to get it done.
That's right. That's exactly right. So that's exciting. Well, the last thing we'll talk about, Jonathan, is this idea of and the importance of aligning your values and your money. That's a conversation that
that's where you start, right?
It's where you start, and and I'll say, we specialize in and doing what we call purpose-focused financial planning, which means that we help clients discover, many times for the first time, what their true values about money actually are. Most of the time when you think about talking to a financial advisor, you think about the conversation being around investments, assets and liabilities, taxes, when you're going to retire. But the reality is that, those things, while they're extremely important and a part of it, you and I, and the way that we approach things, don't believe that that's where the conversation begins. The conversation begins is what's important to you about money.
Yeah, those
what's
were more
driving
goals,
you.
right?
Those are
Yeah,
goals.
yeah.
And what's driving you. And what's interesting, ladies, and we're not going to be able to go into full detail about this. We have a whole section on helping you identify your goals and your values and your goals. But what you'll find is that when your financial life is in conflict with what's really important to you, that's where a lot of your unhappiness comes from. That's where a lot of the unhappiness and the conflicts in marriage come from. In fact, when you look at the divorce rate at 50%, and money is at the top, along with lack of communication. So we believe that it's really important that you understand, what those values are. Because think about it. Our attitude about money defines everything that matters about your personal financial situation. In other words, how much money you need, how hard you're going to have to work to get it, how it's going to feel when you finally get it, okay? And so we know, that's why you and I can say with total confidence that when people understand what money means to them and what's driving them around that, then especially these ladies, they're unstoppable in terms of what they can do.
Yeah, think about it. When people feel secure that it's going to provide for them from now on at the lifestyle that they want to lead, being able to go and travel and do the things that they want to do, they really don't have much worries around it anymore. If you can provide them with that security and the answer to that question, they usually live it out pretty worry-free after that point. All right. Well, thank you so much for tuning in today. I know, Glenn, we covered so much today, but we have got so many great topics coming up in future episodes. We've got great people that we've got lined up in advance. Neat topics, everything from doctors out there to attorneys, and not all of it to do about retirement either.
That's exactly right.
What's so great, we just really want to touch on a lot of aspects that we hear coming in from the field, people's concerns out there, and what's meaningful to them. So if you haven't already, make sure that you subscribe to our newsletter where you'll be notified about our future podcast episodes. By subscribing, you'll also be able to unlock exclusive access to our weekly webinars where we dive in and discuss some of the topics even further. And as always, you can reach us by phone at Keystone Financial Resources. Our office number is 615-661-9554, or you can visit us at our website, www.keystonefinancialresources.com, where you'll be able to take advantage of our free personalized retirement review. Thanks for joining us. We hope to see you again.
You have been listening to Her Time to Retire with Glenn Price and Jonathan Scott. Glenn and Jonathan would love to talk to you and answer any of your retirement questions. All listeners can take advantage of a free 15-minute consultation with Glenn and Jonathan, whether via a phone call, Zoom meeting, or in person. You can schedule your consultation by calling 615-661-9554 or by visiting our website at www.keystonefinancialresources.com. Thanks for listening. The opinions expressed by Keystone Financial Resources and guests on this podcast are their own and do not reflect the opinions of this station. All statements and opinions expressed are based upon information considered reliable, although it should not be relied upon as such. Any statements or opinions are subject to change without notice. Investments involve risk and, unless otherwise stated, are not guaranteed. Past performance cannot be used as an indicator to determine future results. Strategies mentioned may not be suitable for everyone. Information expressed does not take into account your specific situation or objectives and is not intended as recommendations appropriate for you. Before acting on any information mentioned, please consult with a qualified tax or investment advisor to determine if it is suitable for your specific situation. This program is designed to provide accurate and authoritative information with regard to subject covered. Investment advisory services offered through Brookstone Capital Management, LLC, or BCM, a registered investment advisor. BCM and Keystone Financial Resources are independent of each other. Insurance products and services are not offered through BCM, but are offered and sold through individually licensed and appointed agents.